right. We're talking about Lost Tribe of the Sith. Not all of it. We'll talk about the first two stories. Because they kind of happen one after the other. And just review. I was initially going to only review the first one, but there's not a lot to talk about with these. So, what is Lost Tribe of the Sith? Well, we're going to talk about Precipice and Skyborn. Lost Tribe of the Sith was John Jackson Miller's series of ebooks and then a comic book miniseries that revolve around a group of Sith that were part of Naga Sadow's invasion fleet that got damaged. Their ship, the Omen, got damaged as they were jumping to hyperspace. They ran into like a Jedi starfighter or something, and they end up crashing. And that's what Precipice is about: is the crash. Takes up most of the short story, and then the captain and his half brother doing Sith things. And that's all I'll say about it. Precipice sucks. I'm not gonna lie. I couldn't care less about any of the characters. Skyborn's a little more interesting. So, we gotta establish some things here with Lost Tribe of the Sith. This is in an era where hyperspace is a new technology, and it's not very trustworthy. So the fact their ship got damaged, it shot them onto a planet out in wild space. And the inhabitants of this planet, they come from the Skyborn, which are they were travelers from another planet. They're not native to the planet, and they're humanoid-esque. And basically, this archaeologist, geologist, I'm not sure what she is like, she's seen the Sith. She's seen them, and she says they're back, and they basically, her people chase her away, only for her to come in contact with the Sith, and the Sith come back, and she's labeled a hero, but at what cost? And that's really Skyborn. So, we gotta talk about Lost Tribe of the Sith, because I have problems with Lost Tribe of the Sith. So, some of this feels right for the time period. Mind you, there's not a lot in this part of the Old Republic. This was not what they decided to backfill the Old Republic with. Which is a shame, because there's some really interesting things that happen in the technology. In my opinion, some of the most interesting of the technologies. But when it came time for Lost Tribe of the Sith, certain things just don't make sense. So I didn't talk about this too much in Golden Age of the Sith. And I wouldn't even think about this if I hadn't just reread Golden Age of the Sith, and I'm glad I did. The Sith don't have lightsabers in Golden Age of the Sith and Fall of the Sith Empire. They don't carry them. What they carry are swords that they imbue with like the dark side that gives them this magenta tint to them, and they can hold up against a lightsaber. Also, the Jedi's lightsabers are not what we would see in latter Tales of the Jedi stuff, because most of Tales of the Jedi happens 1,000 years after Golden Age of the Sith and Fall of the Sith Empire. And technology's progressed enough that they can have powered lightsabers without batteries. And that's what the Golden Age of the Sith and Fall of the Sith Empire Jedi lightsabers have: big battery packs, and they have a cable that connects it, kind of like the tools the Ghostbusters used to get the ghosts. I don't remember what that's called. I'm not the biggest Ghostbusters fan, but it's kind of like that. Oh, sorry, we had a big old Bubba gonna knock over the camera, so we had to stop that. Anyway, but when you get to Lost Tribe of the Sith, this is the first thing I noticed, is that all the Sith have lightsabers. They're magenta-colored lightsabers, but they are lightsabers, and they are lightsabers like we see in like the Freedom Nat Uprising and going forward with the Jedi and Sith. They're standard lightsabers, is what I'm getting at, which doesn't make sense. And then we get really peculiar if you really start to think about it. The way Kevin J. Anderson sets up Golden Age of the Sith is that a group of dark Jedi is the best way I can describe them. Jedi that just gave into the dark side and they were cast out of the Jedi Order. A handful of them went to worlds like Korriban and they formed the Sith Empire. They ran into the Sith species and they interbred with them, and that's why Naga Sadow kind of looks like a Sith, but also like the species Sith, and kind of also looks like a human. He's got facial hair, he's got some human features to him, and a lot of them, like Marco Ragnos, and like all those, they're like half Sith, half human, and it seems like these Dark Jedi have been gone for a long time because Odan is not he's a scholar Jedi. He's not a warrior. And Odan whole thing is that he's studied everything, like just about everything, all the records of the Jedi. So this had to have happened long before Golden Age of the Sith happened, like Issue 0 happened. It should have happened long before that, but sometime after the Dawn of the Jedi stuff. Because in that, which also doesn't make sense, is that there are Sith, like Sekno's Wrath, and he's a Sith, part of the Sith species, and there's quite a few of the Sith. I don't know what happened, like, it's not very clear what happened after Force War and how we got to Golden Age of the Sith, but there was some sort of schism, and a bunch of Jedi left. We're not even clear if they were all human or not. Some of them were human. We don't even know how many of them necessarily left, but a group of them disappeared. They left the known galaxy and they went to worlds like Korriban. And sorry, my cats are fighting for no apparent reason. And they started forming. They formed the Sith Empire that Marco Ragnos ran. But if you read Lost Tribe of the Sith, this seems to have happened fairly recently because we have straight up human Sith. Which makes sense for like Vitiate's Sith Empire that happens later, like 1,000 years later. But, like, it doesn't make sense here. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, Lost Tribe of the Sith, for all John Jackson Miller, like, tries to make this tie into Golden Age of the Sith and Fall of the Sith Empire, it doesn't work. It doesn't work really at all. And it hurt my brain. As like a continuity person, it just does not make sense. This will be a common theme through all of Lost Tribe of the Sith, is that the shit doesn't make sense. And I'm sorry, I do like John Jackson Miller, but I don't like these. I'm just going to throw that out there, especially Precipice. Precipice is boring. I'd rather watch a used condom dry on a wall than, like, read Precipice again. Skyborn's a little more interesting. The geologist lady, she's a fine enough character, and the manipulations that start to happen with her are interesting, and it's very Sith-like. But, I mean, out of all the Sith stuff, I'd rather read just about all of it. With the exception of Red Harvest. I kind of hate that. I hate that a lot more than I hate this. But it has a similar vibe, which is that we should care about some of the Sith. I'm sorry, at least with these two stories, I couldn't care about any of the Sith. They're all villainous, as far as I'm concerned. Some are maybe a little less villainous. But yeah, that's really it. What would I rank these? Precipice gets a 2.5 out of 5. It's a terrible way to start a series of ebooks, even if they're free. Which these were. The reason I'm not even like touching like all 9 of these at once is because they weren't initially released that way. It was a cash grab for Fate of the Jedi to write a 9th one to make it tie into that. So these get to be reviewed on their own as I go through the timeline. Skyborn gets a 3 out of 5. It's a bit better. It's like John Jackson Miller kind of starts to get his footing on this. But yeah, no, these suck. They just suck. I'm curious about what I'll think of the next ones, but I'm not holding my breath. So anyway, have a nice day.